In April 2000, the most turbulent La Liga in history was about to come to an end, and Atletico Madrid, who had been struggling in the relegation zone for a long time, welcomed their last chance amidst the ups and downs. See how Yang Hao can turn the tide and lead Atletico Madrid to stage a crazy relegation battle, writing the most dazzling epic chapter in the most glorious era of world football. Novel keyword. Goal. Coach has no pop-ups, let's score. Coach TXT complete collection download, goal now. Coach's latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. The most absurd century jokes. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. The most absurd century jokes on April 8, 2000, in the southern part of Madrid, the capital of Spain. On the north bank of the Manzanares River, next to the M30 highway. Yang Hao got off the back seat of the taxi, and when he turned his head, he could see the magnificent Calderon Stadium spanning over the M30 road. Every day, there is an endless flow of traffic passing through the tunnel below this crawling giant beast. Everyone just needs to look up and can see the huge bronze team emblem of Atletico Madrid like the current Yang Hao. In earlier years, when Atletico Madrid's performance was thriving, the team emblem gave people a feeling of increasing authority. But in the past 2 years, especially now, everyone's feeling is more of decline and ruin. The teams in the relegation zone should be like this. Yang Hao stood at the intersection, looking from afar at the Atletico Madrid emblem above the tunnel entrance, feeling a hint of eagerness in his heart. He slightly adjusted his suit, tightened his briefcase, and walked towards the office gate of Calderon Stadium. Today, he came to interview as the head coach of Atletico Madrid. Yang Hao never believed that crossing this impossible thing would happen to him. In his past life, he was an unknown street wrestler on Chidian Chinese Online in 2023, writing football novels for over a decade. Suddenly one day, he had a hard time thinking about writing a novel about saving Chinese football, and without a doubt, his grades were in a mess. Even the wish that cannot be fulfilled by the divine dragon of Namek should not be thought of by mortals. The script of the national football team never makes people write it wrong. At the moment he decided to cut it off, he fiercely whipped a few of his big-eared melon seeds, really wanting to have a chicken chop. Feeling depressed, Yang Hao went to the park to relax, sat on the stone railing of the Huxin Pavilion to rest, and at the same time, conceived a new book that had not yet landed. Unexpectedly, by a stroke of fate, he accidentally fell head-on. At that moment, he kept swearing in his mind that coding would never be easy again. I will definitely focus on coding, strive to collect tickets, follow up on reading, and subscribe. Help, I can't swim. As expected, the heavens still treated those men who had reformed and looked handsome well, so he was saved by someone. But who would have thought that when he landed, it was already 2,000 years ago, and he was in Madrid, the capital of Spain. Yang Hao was thinking, is this a punishment for him to write about the national football? As a seasoned person who has created books in his past life and read countless travel online articles, Yang Hao's first thing after confirming that he won the travel lottery was to search for the travel gift package. Commonly known as Golden Finger. He waited left and right and sadly found that when writing a book, he pounced, but when traveling through time, he pounced even more. A traveler without even a golden finger is equivalent to rushing to grandma's house in the first round of water tests. There's no way, people have already passed through, what else can we do? Fortunately, Yang Hao found that his new identity in this world is quite good, with a coaching certificate that can teach top leagues, and he is also proficient in 2 foreign languages, English and Spanish. This made him very impulsive towards a staff member in Barcelona. People from the same path. After adapting to the identity of a time traveler, Yang Hao began to embark on his coaching plan. He is a fan himself, has written football novels for over a decade, knows professional football from the past and the next few years very well, and after traveling through time, he has a coaching certificate. Is there a job that is more suitable for him than coaching? In 2000, Madrid was full of ups and downs. Real Madrid's performance was lackluster, and head coach Toshak was dismissed due to poor performance. Second-team coach Bosque went to the first team for the third time to put out a fire, leading this stormy and heavily indebted powerhouse team to struggle forward in the hopeless situation of the league. At present, Real Madrid only has two fronts left: the Champions League and the Copa del Rey. The debt of billions of euros has caused controversy for Real Madrid's chairman, Santos. The opposition, Florentino Perez, is a well-known Spanish tycoon who is determined to overthrow Santos in this summer's presidential election. His campaign slogan is, "Pay off the debt and sign the world's top superstar, Barcelona King Luis Figo, for Real Madrid." To everyone, this is a crazy slogan that is impossible to achieve. But as a traveler, Yang Hao is too familiar with this script. So, he found a way to infiltrate the Real Madrid attacking fan club established by Florentino specifically for election. With the analytical skills and football knowledge accumulated through years of writing football novels, as well as the advantage of the time traveler and his repeated support for Bosque, Real Madrid has repeatedly defeated strong opponents in the Champions League, allowing Yang Hao to quickly stand out in the fan club. Finally, he had the privilege of having face-to-face communication with Florentino, and he gently reminded her that there were fatal flaws in the superstar strategy and that some improvements were necessary. Regarding this, Yang Hao has also prepared a complete plan specifically to have a good discussion with Florentino. But as a result, Florentino only assumed that he was constantly boasting without stopping. At this moment, Florentino was full of confidence in the grand plan he had outlined, and he could not hear any dissent. Not only that, he also directly expelled Yang Hao from the attacking fan club. The reason is both far-fetched and reasonable. Yang Hao is not a member of Real Madrid. When God closes a door for you, he often opens a window for you. Despite being rejected by Florentino, Yang Hao met Michel Angel Hill, a 37-year-old general manager of Atletico Madrid, who came to drink his sorrows at a bar in Madrid. Because Yang Hao scolded Florentino a few times, stating that Real Madrid would definitely suffer a big loss due to his superstar strategy, Hill, who had a drink, cheered him and invited him to drink. The two got to know each other as a result. After learning about Yang Hao's relationship with Florentino, as well as his analysis of Real Madrid's issues and Florentino's superstar strategy, Hill greatly appreciated and invited him to analyze Atletico Madrid. This season, Atletico Madrid's days are much more difficult than Real Madrid's. Real Madrid's performance is poor. Although their ranking once dropped to around 10th in the standings, they have a strong foundation and immediately rebounded. They are now working hard to qualify for the Champions League next season. More importantly, Bosque's team has repeatedly performed well on the Champions League stage, advancing all the way. But Atletico Madrid is different. This season, under the coaching of Italian tinkerer Ranieri, the results were very poor, especially at the end of December when the club's chairman Herses Hill was imprisoned, exposing the team's debt of over €70 million, and the government entrusted Atletico Madrid with custody. All positions, including Vice-Chairman Cerezo and General Manager Hill, have been suspended. During the winter break, under the leadership of interim trustee Luis Rubi Blanco, in order to improve the team's financial situation, the Spanish golden boy José Mali was sold to Serie A powerhouse AC Milan for €19 million. Then he sold Argentine centre-back José Chamo to the Red and Black Legion for €3 million. Two transactions earned €22 million, but the overall strength of the team was affected. The custody group was heavily condemned by Spanish media, and Atletico Madrid fans continued to protest against the custody group's decision through protests and other means. Although Ranieri refused to align with the media and fans, the team's performance deteriorated and they fell directly into the relegation zone. The Italian ultimately submitted his resignation on March 3, and the management team temporarily appointed former Atletico Madrid coach Antic to take over the team. Just like how many times Bosque has taken over Real Madrid, Antioch has also made 3 appearances in the palace. But unlike his affirmation of Bosque, Yang Hao bluntly asserts that Antique cannot save Atletico Madrid. On the contrary, he will lead Atletico Madrid into the abyss of relegation. No matter how many years later, the world will find Atletico Madrid this season unbelievable and unbelievable, because with Atletico Madrid's star lineup configuration, they should not be relegated under any circumstances. Who does Atletico Madrid have today? Spanish Prince Kiko, Dutch super scorer Hasselbank, Spanish prodigy midfielder Belilon, Brazilian prodigy midfielder Juninho, loaned to Middlesbrough, Argentine winger Solari, Portuguese prodigy midfielder Hugo Lyer, Uruguayan midfielder Pablo Garcia, Spanish midfielder Baraja, local left-back Capudira, goalkeeper Molina, not to mention that Atletico Madrid itself has a group of strong core players, such as Tony Munoz, Santi, José Luque, Gamera, Cherso Ayala, Gaspa, Aguilera from any perspective. The current Atletico Madrid can be said to be a shining star, with a strong talent pool, and able to compete in the top three and even win the league championship. How could they not perform so poorly and even be relegated? Even by 2023, countless people are still puzzled by Atletico Madrid's relegation. Many people accuse Ranieri of coaching recklessly, while others accuse Hill's imprisonment of having a significant impact on Atletico Madrid. Others believe it is the impact of the club's financial crisis. Yang Hao told Xiao Hill that these are all issues of this season, but Atletico Madrid has always had a very deep-seated fatal problem over the years, which is the most fatal. If this problem is not solved properly, no one can save Atletico Madrid, including the former double champion Antoine. And the fact also proves that Yang Hao is right. Starting from the 27th round of the league, Atletico Madrid's performance has not improved under the guidance of Antic. 1 draw with Real Betis, 0.1 loss to Valladolid, 1.1 home draw with Real Madrid, 0.3 loss to Numancia, 1.2 loss to Athletic Bilbao. Then last night, in the 32nd round of La Liga, they suffered a devastating 1.4 away defeat to Deportivo. Under the leadership of Antic, Atletico Madrid not only failed to break out of the relegation zone, but also repeatedly declined in rankings. Now ranked 19th in La Liga, only slightly better than Sevilla at the bottom of the rankings, but has already opened up a 4-point gap with Real Betis led by Hiddink, who is 17th outside the relegation zone. With 6 rounds left in the league, this is almost an irreversible situation. The entire Spanish, European football, and even fans around the world have unanimously concluded that Atletico Madrid's relegation is a foregone conclusion. Even Atletico Madrid fans began to accept this judgment, so after losing to Deportivo away, they organized an even larger protest march, forcing the government to compromise, suspend custody, and bring back Old Hill, Cerezo, and Young Hill. It is obvious that both the government and the management team are unwilling to bear the stigma of demoting Atletico Madrid. Having so many football stars and ultimately being relegated would be the most outrageous century joke in the history of the 4 major leagues. Saving soldiers is like extinguishing a fire. Hill and his son had just returned to Calderon Stadium, and Hill immediately advocated for a change of coach. After 2 or 3 months of contact and multiple in-depth conversations, he firmly believes in Yang Hao. He firmly believed that if someone could save Atletico Madrid from chaos, then that person must be Yang Hao. So, the day after his disastrous defeat to Deportivo La Coruña, Yang Hao walked into the Calderon Stadium and stood in front of Old Hill, Cerezo, and Little Hill. When both Old Hill and Cerezo were surprised by his youth, he made a promise with a resounding voice. Only I can help Atletico Madrid avoid relegation and become the strongest team in Spain and even Europe in the coming years. New book upload, recommendation, collection, and follow.up. All kinds of requests, thank you. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. The Number 1 Criminal. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2 The Number 1 Criminal. Only I can help Atletico Madrid avoid relegation and become the strongest team in Spain and even Europe in the coming years. When Yang Hao's powerful words were spoken in the closed conference room, Old Hill sitting opposite him couldn't help but burst out laughing. Although he is already 67 years old, with a bulky and obese physique, and has just been charged with multiple charges by the government, he is still very energetic and does not feel any sense of despair. This is also very normal. He is a fierce hero who was killed in the midst of fierce battles. On the contrary, Little Hill is more like an indecisive wealthy second generation. You know, my son is very optimistic about you. He told me a lot and even started arguing with me, which forced me to take some time to sit here and listen to you. Old Hill sat there with a big belly, laughing so much that his flesh trembled and his eyes fixed on Yang Hao, exuding a strong aura. But if you can only make such exaggerated remarks, then please go back. As soon as Old Hill finished speaking, Little Hill beside him couldn't sit still. On the other hand, the 52-year-old Vice President Cerezo has always been stable, as if everything had nothing to do with him. Yang Hao was not panicked, he also came prepared. Have you inquired about me? This is good news, proving that Old Hill has seriously considered it. There's no need to deliberately inquire. The conversations you had with Florentino when attacking fans cannot be hidden. There were many people present at the time, and I think Florentino said it well. At least that's the first impression you gave me. Old Hill also replied rudely. Do you know that I told him there was a fatal problem with his superstar strategy? His superstar strategy. Hesses Hill sneered directly, he has a damn superstar strategy, isn't he just following us and picking up people's teeth? The chairman of Atletico Madrid is indeed qualified and confident to say such words. The superstar strategy is not new in Spain. Before the restructuring of La Liga clubs, everyone had a membership system. To run for the president of a membership club, one had to rely on votes, and the easiest way to win the votes of fans was, of course, to promise to introduce superstars. All membership clubs have been played this way for a long time. It can even be traced back to the Bernabeu era of Real Madrid, such as Di Stefano, Puskás, Copa, and so on. Old Hill also plays this same game of going up. For example, he signed Portuguese superstar Paul Futre for Atletico Madrid, or he previously signed Italian star Vieri for Atletico Madrid, both of which are playing superstar strategy. So, he really has the right to ridicule Florentino like this. I think he is an upgraded version of the radical and adventurous superstar strategy of the past. Here, Yang Hao gave Florentino a positive evaluation. Introducing Figo from arch-rivals Barcelona. No, it's about signing a superstar every year, and ultimately having every position on the team be filled with superstar players, including the coaching staff. It has to be said that this idea in 2000 was really bold and tempting. Old Hill must also acknowledge this. So, what's the problem with this strategy? Is it money? No, I believe as a master of money, he must have thought about how to make money, but he ignored time. Time. Now not only Old Hill, but also Cerezo has been attracted. Florentino's candidacy is the most anticipated event in Madrid, Spain, and even the entire European football scene this season. Luis Figo was born in November 1972 and is now 27 years old. I believe Florentino was prepared to run for him, and the media has previously reported that Florentino had contact with Figo's agent José Vega. In that news, Atletico Madrid legend Paul Futre was also implicated. Assuming he signs Figo this year and another superstar next year, Figo will be 28 years old by then. What about the year after tomorrow, the year after tomorrow? One superstar a year is really tempting, but how long can Figo maintain his peak form? Old Hill, Cerezo, and others suddenly fell silent. This is indeed a problem. The current football world is completely different from the football world 10 years later. These current superstars are basically older. After all, players can only enter the golden period of their career after the age of 25. They play for 2 years at their peak and achieve the name of superstars, which is around 27 years old. It is extremely rare for someone like Michael Owen to become famous at the age of 19, score goals around the age of 20, and become a superstar. Yang Hao is absolutely right. One superstar a year, how many years can Figo maintain his state at this age? Florentino doesn't want you to disrupt his plan, Old Hill said as he looked at Yang Hao. Yes, Yang Hao nodded with a smile. Regardless of whether Florentino had thought about this level before Yang Hao pointed it out, at this point, the superstar strategy is already on the line and cannot be changed. Even if he insists, he must go up. Otherwise, which head will he take to challenge Sands this summer? That's why he refused to listen to what Yang Hao said, and even directly expelled him from the attacking fan club. After understanding this layer, Old Hill laughed heartily and began to carefully examine the young man in front of him. I am really very young. I'm only 25 years old. If we were to switch to a professional player, we would have just entered the golden period of our professional career. As a result, he is applying for the head coach who requires the most experience and qualifications. Let's talk about it now. I'm interested in hearing your analysis of our Atletico Madrid team. Old Hill moved his buttocks to make himself sit more comfortably, and said. Atletico Madrid's problems are very complex and intricate. When Yang Hao wrote an article in his previous life, he also specifically studied this issue, mainly believing that it was the misconduct of Chairman Hill that led to imprisonment. The club was also heavily indebted, and the team's internal morale was scattered. Ranieri and Antioch, as famous coaches, are powerless in this regard. After a deep conversation with Xiao Hill, he gained a deeper understanding of the background and gained a deeper understanding. The whole thing still needs to revolve around Mr. Hill. The world knows that Old Hill's history of prosperity is not glamorous. His first bucket of gold was a tofu project that led to the death of 58 people, which took place during the chaotic years of 1968 when Spain was still under the rule of dictator Franco. That was Old Hill's first imprisonment. After being released from prison, Old Hill did not restrain himself, but instead became even more resolute, expanding his real estate business. When the real estate business reaches a certain level, Old Hill is not satisfied with the business world. In 1987, he took over Atletico Madrid with ambitious plans to turn the team into a powerhouse that would not lose to the city's arch-rivals Real Madrid. In 1991, the well-known veteran Hill sought to enter politics through football and established the independent and liberal group Hill Party, which was very popular in southern Spain and island areas near North Africa. He was elected as the mayor of Marbella. For a moment, the momentum of Old Hill and Atletico Madrid was unstoppable. But trouble also comes with it. In 1992, due to debt issues, the Spanish Football Association forced La Liga teams to undergo restructuring. Except for a few teams such as Real Madrid, Barcelona, and Athletic Bilbao, all of them were changed from membership to shareholding. During the restructuring process of Atletico Madrid, it was reported that Old Hill and Vice-Chairman Cerezo had falsified accounts and illegally privatized Atletico Madrid, turning it into private property. This kind of thing is not uncommon throughout history, both at home and abroad, and many club management teams do it this way. But it also became the core weapon for political enemies to attack Old Hill. The direct reason why Hill was imprisoned this time is that during his tenure as mayor of Marbella, he privately used government funds to sponsor Atletico Madrid's shirt-chest advertisements, with a total sponsorship fee of up to €30 million. When Atletico Madrid won the Double Crown, Marbella was the sponsor of the chest advertisement. Coincidentally, it is now the time for the mayoral election in Marbella. It's hard to say if there is any connection behind this. In European football, examples like Hill are not uncommon. For example, AC Milan's Berlusconi, the Moratti family behind Inter Milan, and Florentino, who is currently preparing to run for Real Madrid president, all have various schemes behind them. For them, football clubs are more of a platform. As for whether sponsoring Atletico Madrid in the name of Marbella is considered a violation, this is quite sensitive. It's like this time, the father and son of Hill and Cerezo counterattacked the management team with a very important weapon. In the 30th round of this season, Atletico Madrid challenged Numancia away, and the management team spent €140,000 without the consent of the board of directors to mobilize 1,000 fans to watch the game away. In the 31st round, the league played against Athletic Bilbao at home. Without the consent of the board of directors, the tickets were bought one get one free, which greatly displeased the fans who had purchased season tickets. The most crucial thing is that we lost both of these games. In a fit of anger, the fans directly pointed their fingers at the government and the custody group. In the past few years, Hill has been very willing to invest in player transfers. Stars such as Paul Futter, Vieri, Simeone, Hasselbank, etc. are willing to spend money to bring in any star he likes. In terms of head coaches, world-class coaches such as Sachai, Antic, and Ranieri also coach Atletico Madrid like a quick glance. This has made him very popular among Atletico Madrid fans. At a critical moment, it was also this advantage that allowed him to take over Atletico Madrid again. But the reason why Atletico Madrid has come to this day is because of Old Hill's achievements and also because of Old Hill's misfortune. He has been in charge of Atletico Madrid for 13 years, changing 23 coaches and 5 substitute coaches, and buying 145 players. This has led to the fact that Atletico Madrid has never been stable in the past years and lacks a complete set of team formation ideas. It is basically Mr. Hill who decides who to hire and who to sign. He wanted to compete with Real Madrid and Barcelona in attacking football, but ignored that Atletico Madrid does not have such a foundation. Many people praise Atletico Madrid for winning the double in the 95-96 season, but they have not noticed that in the 94-95 season, Atletico Madrid only ranked 14th in La Liga, just one step away from the relegation zone. In the 96-97 season, after winning the double crown, Atletico Madrid fell to 5th place in the league. In the 97-98 season, Atletico Madrid ranked 7th in the league, and coach Antoine Wong, who won the double, was laid off. Last season, under the guidance of Italian coach Sachai, the team almost fell into the relegation zone. It was Antic who quickly saved the fire in March, which helped the team barely avoid relegation. After finishing the relegation, Antic was fired and took on the role of excellent tinkerer Ranieri in Valencia. Unexpectedly, Atletico Madrid fell directly into the relegation zone this season, and Antioch once again put out a fire halfway through. From a paper strength perspective, Atletico Madrid has never lost, and there is no shortage of star players, even world-class ones. But on the field, Atletico Madrid's performance is like a roller coaster, playing with their heartbeat. Over the years, the Bed Sheet Legion has been a black hole for famous coaches and football stars. And all these questions undoubtedly point directly at Old Hill. If Atletico Madrid were to be relegated this season, you would be the number one culprit. Yang Hao said without hesitation. Bastard. Old Hill was furious and slammed his desk with all his might, standing up and glaring angrily at Yang Hao. That looks like it's going to eat people. Seeking collection, recommendation tickets, and follow-up reading. All kinds of requests, thank you. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Who is the first brother? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Who is the first brother? A ruthless figure like Old Hill, even at the age of 67, still exudes a strong aura in a fit of rage. Yang Hao, who was the first to bear the brunt, was startled, and Little Hill and Cerezo sitting beside him became nervous. Especially for Little Hill, he is always prepared to step forward and dissuade, fearing that Old Hill will become angry and hit others. In this regard, his elderly family has a criminal record. In March 1996, at the entrance of the Spanish Football Association, he had a fierce argument with the general manager of Compostela Club, directly attacking him with punches and kicks, which was heavily criticized by the Spanish media and fans. This move has greatly damaged the image of Atletico Madrid. Yang Hao was well prepared and gave a relaxed smile before calmly asking, "Did I make a mistake?" He stared straight at the sharp gaze of the angry Old Hill, not giving in a single step. Because he knew that Little Hill would stop him in time. Here, I'll show you this set of data. Speaking, Yang Hao took out a document from his briefcase, laid it on his desk, and pushed it towards Old Hill across from him. In a fit of anger, Old Hill still grabbed it and looked at it casually. Yang Hao's document compiles all the match data of Atletico Madrid in La Liga over the past few years, including the number of goals scored and goals conceded. It provides a detailed analysis of the data for each season and compares it with other teams. The final conclusion drawn is that Atletico Madrid's attack heavily relies on superstars, but the problem is not significant. The results of the league always depend on the quality of their defense. For example, in the season when they won the double, they scored 75 goals and conceded 32 goals, making them the best defensive team in La Liga at that time. So far this season, they have played 32 rounds but have conceded 53 goals, making them the worst defensive team in La Liga. Yang Hao's set of data not only counted Atletico Madrid, but also the performance of other teams in the La Liga each season, especially the performance of strong teams. Real Madrid and Barcelona have always had strong offensive firepower, but their defense has actually been good. Real Madrid has had European-level centre-backs like Giro and Sanchez in the past few years, as well as world-class midfielders like Redondo in their midfield. Barcelona also has excellent centre-backs such as Nadal, De Paul, Ronald Koeman, and Aburrado, with Guardiola in the midfield. What about Atletico Madrid? In the past few years, Atletico Madrid's team formation has never had a specific strategy. He has invested a huge amount of money in the players in the midfield, from Paul Futter to Kiko, and then to Vieri and Hasselbank. He'll never hesitates to bring in frontcourt stars. But in the center and back, a Simone finally arrived and played for 2 years, winning the double crown and going to Inter Milan. Specifically, this season, the team's midfield is not lacking in talent. For example, the Czech Golden Generation's Radek Baber, who is also the main defensive midfielder of the current team. There is also Spanish midfielder Ruben Baraja, who later joined Valencia and formed the strongest defensive duo in Europe with Alberta. At the age of 25, he is now a substitute. Later on, he performed very well in Osasuna and even transferred to Uruguayan midfielder Pablo Garcia from Real Madrid. He is now also at Atletico Madrid, but he was transferred to the second team. His playing time in the first team this season is 0. This is a very strange phenomenon. In Yang Hao's past life, these players showed outstanding abilities after being relegated to Atletico Madrid this season and leaving the team, including Bellilan, who had not played well at Atletico Madrid in the past 2 years, and Argentine winger Solari. Now, Atletico Madrid's defensive line is unable to advance to the Spanish national team with Santi Denia, and Paraguay's 2 international players Carlos Gamera and Cherso Ayala. Please note that this Ayala is not the Ayala from Argentina. These players all have a common characteristic, which is that they are all around 1.80 meters tall. In the 1.4 defeat to Deportivo La Coruña last night, high school forward Roy McKay scored a hat-trick. 2 weeks ago, they lost 0.3 away to Numancia, and high center Jorge Delgado scored a brace. In the current era of high center forwards, the competitive disadvantage brought about by height differences makes Atletico Madrid's defense particularly fragile. And what about the midfield? From Ranieri to Antioch, everyone believes in the 442 tactic. Although Jose Mali, the golden boy, was sold at a high price during the winter break, the team still has Dutch striker Hasselbank, Spanish Prince Kiko, and Uruguay's Maradona Fernando Correa. The more difficult the team is, the more it needs to rely on a backbone like Kiko. So, double forwards became standard equipment. If there are 4 defenders and 2 centers, then only 4 centers can be played. What about the traditional size 10 front waist Bellilan? So, he could only be paired with a partner, who was Baber. Players like Baraja and Pablo Garcia naturally lack playing opportunities. The problem that comes with it can be imagined that when Bellilan is unable to provide sufficient protection in midfield, the defensive line is easily exposed to the opponent's artillery fire, coupled with the disadvantage of physical confrontation in the center-back, Atletico Madrid has thus become the worst defensive team in La Liga this season. If it weren't for the support of Hasselbank, who was attacking, Atletico Madrid would have performed even worse this season. So far this season, Atletico Madrid has scored 41 goals in La Liga, with Hasselbank contributing 23 goals alone. He played 7 out of 8 matches in the UEFA Cup and contributed 7 goals. And the King's Cup. This is also the only commendable aspect of Atletico Madrid this season, which is that they reached the semi-finals of the Copa del Rey. Next Wednesday, Atletico Madrid will host Barcelona led by Van Gaal in the first leg of the Copa del Rey semi-finals at home. It is precisely because of the heavy emphasis on attacking and neglecting defense in the recruitment aspect that the team's attack and defense have become imbalanced, resulting in serious problems that have affected the results of this season. Coincidentally, the team has also encountered the imprisonment of Old Hill, causing panic among the team. In this situation, if the team had a backbone to stand up and stabilize their morale, the problem would not have been too serious, such as Real Madrid's Giro, or Barcelona's Nadal and Guardiola. But there are no such players at Atletico Madrid. In the past few years, football stars have flowed in and out like flowing water, seriously weakening the influence of local players such as Kiko and Aguilera in the locker room. The head coach has also changed frequently, which has led to the locker room being extremely loose, lacking a core culture and cohesion. In this situation, a financial crisis broke out, all management stepped down, and the club was in panic. All problems erupted like a volcano, and the team's performance collapsed instantly. Yang Hao's data is very detailed, and he has also pointed out the biggest problem at Atletico Madrid very accurately. That's defense. This is completely different from what Antioch said before. Antioch previously said in an interview that Atletico Madrid's defense is not a problem, and the biggest problem is attacking. Old Hill patiently read the materials handed to him by Yang Hao, then looked deeply at the young man in front of him and sat down, still looking coldly at Yang Hao. This made Yang Hao and Xiao Hill secretly glance at each other, with a hint of joy flashing in their eyes. There's a play. Perhaps you're right in your analysis, but so what? Pointing out the problem and solving it are two different things. After a pause, Old Hill chuckled and said, compared to you, inexperienced newbie, why don't I continue to use Antioch? Do you think that if Antique can solve these problems, why haven't they won a single game in the past 6 rounds of the league? This statement clearly made Old Hill's heart skip a beat. He has long been dissatisfied with Antioch. After the team won the double, Antioch failed to produce satisfactory results for 2 consecutive seasons. Later, when he switched to Saki, his performance was even worse, and Old Hill invited Antioch back midway. The request from the head coach, who is currently unemployed with Atletico Madrid's termination fee, is simple, with a contract term of 1.5 years. Old Hill gave him, and the team was also relegated, but last summer he let Antioch get away with a 1-year contract compensation and invited Ranieri. Who would have thought that Ranieri did worse than Saki? When Old Hill lost control of the team, the management team once again called back Antioch, who was still receiving the club's termination payment. This time, the Serbian is once again requesting a 1.5-year contract. The whole thing caused a huge uproar among Atletico Madrid fans, and they all felt that Antioch's request was a bit excessive. Little Hill said that Old Hill even cursed at Antioch at home. From the perspective of a migrant worker, Yang Hao feels that Antique's demands are understandable. But Antique cannot reverse Atletico Madrid's current decline. I'm different from him. He has a contract, and even if the team is relegated this season, everyone can't blame him. He deserves to earn a penny. Yang Hao looked directly at Old Hill and pointed to the core of the problem. But I am different. I have been waiting for a long time and urgently need a coaching opportunity to prove my strength, so I will do my best, even at all costs. Old Hill stared deeply at Yang Hao for a while and then asked, but why are you coaching Atletico Madrid? Just because you have a coaching certificate? Or is it because you are studying in the sports management department at the Cologne Sports Institute in university? Yang Hao chuckled and spread his hands, sitting directly across from him, without hesitation, looking at Old Hill. I can't prove this anymore, you can only bet. You know, our current era is completely different from the past. Football nowadays emphasizes division of labor and cooperation, with physical fitness coaches, specialized scouts for studying opponents, specialized tactical assistants for tactics, and specialized assistant coaches for training. The most important thing for the current head coach is here. Yang Hao pointed to his temple. Old Hill remained silent. He had to admit that the young man in front of him was very bold and courageous, daring to speak so confidently in front of him. That's really what Florentino said. If it were before he was imprisoned last year, he would definitely have kicked him out without hesitation. But this imprisonment, especially the turbulence in the past 3 months, made him deeply feel the problems that Atletico Madrid has encountered. Yang Hao's words opened up this layer of mystery for him. This made him reflect for the first time on everything he had done for Atletico Madrid. Is the young man in front of me worth taking a gamble on? And his own son. Old Hill turned his head to look at the nervous little Hill. He knew this son too well and was also very clear about what he was up to with Cerezo, but he didn't care. Because this is his son. Yang Hao sat leisurely because he knew that someone would be more urgent than him. That's Xiao Hill across from him, and Cerezo, who seems to have been sitting steadily on the fishing platform all along. Since the 1996 assault incident, Hill has been the biggest obstacle to Atletico Madrid's development. Whether it's Cerezo, who followed Old Hill to join the Atletico Madrid board in 1987, or Little Hill, who has been serving as the club's general manager since 1992, if he wants to become Atletico Madrid's top brother, he must first move away from this mountain above his head. Yang Hao knows about this matter, Little Hill and Cerezo know about it, and Old Hill also knows about it. He is already 67 years old. Collect, recommend, and follow up. End of this chapter. There is not much time left for Yang Hao in chapter 4. You are listening at novelfull.audio. There is not much time left for Yang Hao in chapter 4, you really scared me to death just now. At the moment he walked out of the conference room, Little Hill had a feeling of surviving the disaster. He had never seen his father calm down under such intense anger and patiently listen to Yang Hao's explanation. If it had been before, I'm afraid I would have seen blood long ago. Until now, my back is still wet, said Little Hill with a bitter smile of fear. It is evident that he is also very afraid of his father. This is not surprising, because their father and son are two different people, two different personalities. How confident are you with this plan? Asked Little Hill with concern. Yang Hao smiled. He had always thought that Xiao Shi was a good person, but he was still relatively inexperienced in doing things. His current problem is not like buying things on Taobao, asking customer service, is your quality good? Only fools can say bad. Yang Hao is not a fool, so he gave a very definite answer. My father was obviously persuaded by you, but he needs to reconsider. I think the problem shouldn't be too big. Go back and wait for my good news, and I will help you persuade him at noon, said Little Hill with a smile. Previously, everything at Atletico Madrid was under the control of Old Hill, and this was his first time making decisions and sticking to his own beliefs. Don't worry, after I go back, I will immediately start improving the plan. By the way, we don't have an assistant coach right now. Antioch took over alone. Do you have any needs? I can have someone prepare for it. Xiao Hill trusted Yang Hao after Ranieri's dismissal. He took away his coaching team, leaving only one goalkeeper coach, George Perezzaro. When Antique rushed to save the field, he did not bring his own team, but instead used Atletico Madrid's coaching team. This is mainly because it was too rushed. And now, Yang Hao is also alone. More importantly, he doesn't even understand how to train. In his past life, he was a coder on Chidian Chinese website, and his best skills were seeking votes, collecting, reading, and subscribing. In short, he rolled 180 rounds of various searches in the icy and snowy world. How to train players. He is just a novice. Help me choose an assistant coach with a head coach style, be quick. Little Hill immediately understood Yang Hao's meaning. Yang Hao needs someone like him to take over Atletico Madrid. Generally speaking, coaching teams are not randomly selected because they need to be familiar with and trust each other. This is different from job applicants in enterprises. The latter can gradually adapt and integrate, but the coaching team must have a deep understanding of each other in order to cooperate seamlessly. Imagine, if the coaching staff themselves cannot cooperate, how can players cooperate? Yang Hao's meaning is very clear. He wants a coach-style assistant with the ability to teach independently. This situation is also common in European football. For example, when Rijkaard coached Barcelona, didn't Barcelona find Ten Carter, the head coach who had already achieved results in the Dutch league, as his assistant? In the later stages of coaching at Manchester United, Ferguson also delegated all matters to assistant coaches such as Queiroz, and he was specifically responsible for controlling the overall direction. "Okay, I'll arrange it right away and come up with a list of candidates as soon as possible," Hill agreed. It's April now, and the league is nearing its end. Finding a suitable coach-style assistant is not an easy task. Especially when it comes to being an assistant to a rookie like Yang Hao, it becomes even more difficult. The most likely thing is to choose one from the second team or the youth team, after all, knowing the root and bottom. Alternatively, it can be directly recruited externally, and many head coaches who are idle and waiting for opportunities will be interested. After all, when working as an assistant coach at Atletico Madrid, if Yang Hao's coaching performance is poor and he is dismissed, the assistant coach will be the first candidate to be directly promoted, which is also a very good opportunity. Yang Hao is not worried at all about this, because Spanish football talent is flourishing and he is not afraid. He is more worried about other things. "Michel, you promised me before to solve the team's salary arrears issue. Don't break your promise," Yang Hao reminded seriously. How can someone willingly listen to you when a new official takes office and doesn't give any sweetness to the dressing room? As a leader, there are two types of power that cannot be lost: personnel and finance. Wage arrears are not a problem for Atletico Madrid alone, but a major issue for the entire Spanish football scene. This problem has always existed, whether it is tracing back or developing in the future. Atletico Madrid players are in a state of panic. Isn't it just that the team is building up high debts and unable to pay salaries? "Don't worry, I'll do my best." Little Hill also had a serious expression on his face. If he could find money, he wouldn't have fallen into the current situation. "It's not about trying our best, it's about certainty," Yang Hao emphasized again. "You know, there are already many players contacting other teams, and the hearts of the entire locker room have completely dissipated. Regardless of whether they can avoid relegation this season, these players cannot be retained. At that time, Atletico Madrid will inevitably face another wave of turbulence and restructuring. Of course, this is an excellent opportunity for Yang Hao. As a crossover, he can easily build a very strong lineup for Atletico Madrid. But the problem is, he needs to stand firm at Atletico Madrid first. At the very least, one must continue to work in the position of head coach in order to be qualified to discuss other matters. "I know what you're thinking, Atletico Madrid is a mess. You want to sell it, right?" Little Hill remained silent. He talked to Yang Hao a lot and didn't even conceal his completely different thoughts from his father. Old Hill has feelings for Atletico Madrid, and he wants to closely connect the Hill family with Atletico Madrid, just like Inter Milan and the Moratti family, Juventus and the Agnelli family, AC Milan and the Berlusconi family, and so on. As a nouveau riche, this is the best way he can think of to enter the upper echelons of society. But Little Hill felt that with the financial resources of the Hill family, they couldn't afford to play the increasingly expensive professional football. So, he wants to sell Atletico Madrid. Even Cerezo thinks the same way. I have to remind you, Michel, that this is not a good time to sell Atletico Madrid at a low price. If you make a hasty decision, you will definitely regret it, but I can help you take Atletico Madrid to a higher level, with minimal investment and the highest returns. But now, you need to give me enough support to get through the current crisis first. The same thing, Yang Hao had already told Xiao Hill before. He believes, so Yang Hao can stand here today. After all the talk had come to this, Xiao Hill finally made up his mind and gritted his teeth, saying, "Don't worry, even if I smash the pot and sell iron, I will definitely help you out of my own pocket." Yang Hao smiled and nodded, waiting for this sentence. By the way, Michel. Before leaving, Yang Hao suddenly thought of something and turned around. I want to say that if I really become the head coach of Atletico Madrid today, your father made a bet, which may be the biggest gamble of his life, but he didn't bet on me. After speaking, Yang Hao waved and turned around to leave. Little Hill was completely stunned. He has always had complex conflicts with his father. On the one hand, he is very afraid of his father, the kind of fear that comes from the bottom of his heart and soul. On the other hand, he looked down upon his father very much, thinking that he was very irritable and crude, and many of his actions and behaviors even made his son feel ashamed. There are many things and many words that his father has never told him. Even the last time the father and son sat down and had a good conversation, he forgot how long ago it was. He always listens obediently, follows his father's arrangements, and follows the rules. So, his father always scolds him for being indecisive and lacking in opinions. But Yang Hao suddenly said this, which actually left him a bit at a loss. Is his father really thinking this way? Intuition told him, yes. But he couldn't believe it. At the moment Yang Hao left the Calderon Stadium, his heart was filled with boundless passion. Old Hill will seriously consider it, which proves that there is a play. The relationship between Hill and his son is actually very common, even in China. The first generation often looks down upon the second generation who grew up with a golden key, and the same goes for the second generation. Some are bold and dare to resist, while others are like Little Hill. But soon, his thoughts returned to Atletico Madrid. Nowadays, Atletico Madrid has many problems, but if we peel them off layer by layer, we will find that this team's strength is still very strong. At least on paper, the strength is very outstanding. Hasselbank is the core competitiveness of the team, with players such as Solari, Bellilan, Baraja, Capudira, and Pablo Garcia all proving their strength in Yang Hao's past life. Moreover, their ages are all between 22 and 27, with the youngest Capudira being only 22 years old but already a key left-back for this season. What they lack is not strength or maturity, but opportunities. An opportunity for them to play at their best on the field. This requires a set of tactics that are suitable for their performance. And the answer is already on the verge of being revealed. That's 4231. This tactic can maximize Bellilan's abilities. In Yang Hao's past life, after transferring to Deportivo, head coach Arueda used the 42-31 tactic, creating a Super Deportivo team that swept European football. Deportivo was also adept in this tactical system. After transferring to Valencia, Baraja and Alberta's double midfielders achieved the Champions League runner-up and La Liga championship. And Hasselbank. This Dutch centre is not tall, but his body is very strong, with speed and impact. He has strong personal abilities, but is not good at coordination and is better at solo combat. It is undoubtedly very appropriate to have him stand at the forefront alone, dedicated to scoring goals and scoring. But in this way, Prince Kiko will be a big problem. When Kiko played against Barcelona last season, he suffered a serious Achilles tendon injury and rested for a long time. However, after recovering from the injury midway through this season, his form has declined. So far, he has not scored a single goal. Yang Hao remembers very clearly that even when Atletico Madrid fell into the second division, Kiko's performance was not ideal, which led to the emergence of young player Torres. So, there's no problem taking down the basic course. The key issue is that humans are emotional animals. Now the Atletico Madrid changing room is like a dangerous powder keg, where even a tiny spark could trigger a big explosion anytime, anywhere. If we can't handle the problem with Kiko properly, they will give a military admonition. The first person to be beheaded is Yang Hao. More importantly, there are only 3 days left until the next match, the semi-finals of the Copa del Rey at home against Barcelona. There is not much time left for Yang Hao. Collect, recommend, and follow up. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Starting from coaching Atletico Madrid. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Starting from coaching Atletico Madrid. Returning from the Calderón Stadium to his apartment, Yang Hao closed his door and started studying Atletico Madrid. Coaching a team is far from as simple as writing a novel, and there is still a lot of preparation work he needs to do. Before noon, Little Hill called him. It's done. After Yang Hao left, the three giants of Atletico Madrid closed the door and held their own meeting to finalize the matter. Yang, I'll entrust you with everything about the team next, Xiao Hill said earnestly over the phone. Both father and son made heavy bets on this gamble. To fire Antioch, Atletico Madrid will need to pay an additional large amount of compensation. But that's not the point. The key is that Yang Hao had no previous coaching experience, and everything was just a matter of mouth. It is a very unsettling question whether he can control the team. More importantly, the current Atletico Madrid can be said to be in a state of turmoil. Once the news spreads and the famous coach Antic is fired, choosing a rookie coach who is only 25 years old and has no coaching experience, is it really a joke? At that time, the father and son will definitely become the laughingstock of everyone in Spain, no, the world. Xiao Hill would say such things on the phone, proving that he is not completely worried about Yang Hao. Michelle, don't worry, I promise you will be proud of the decision you made today. Trust me. On the other side of the phone, Hill agreed and mentioned that he had already asked someone to look for suitable assistant candidates. He also made a phone call to Fernando Zambrano, the head coach of Atletico Madrid's second team. This 50-year-old Spanish coach has previously coached Vallecano, but his experience at Atletico Madrid is somewhat similar to that of Antioch. In March 1999, he fought a fire in Atletico Madrid's second team, and his contract only lasted until the end of the previous season. As a result, Carlos Aguilar, the head coach of this season, had a poor coaching performance and was dismissed in November 1999, so Atletico Madrid once again invited Zambrano back. According to what Hill had communicated with him, Zambrano is not very interested in serving as an assistant coach for the first team. He strongly opposes rookies like Yang Hao taking over the team, believing that this is a crazy decision. Yang Hao was not surprised by this either. In his memory, Antioch did not finish coaching this season, and after class, his successor was Zambrano. That is to say, Yang Hao snatched away the coaching opportunity that should have belonged to Zambrano. This Spanish coach certainly wouldn't be happy. Of course, firefighting Atletico Madrid was also the pinnacle of Zambrano's coaching career. It's okay, let's look for it again, Yang Hao smiled. From beginning to end, Yang Hao gave Xiaoxi a feeling of calmness, which somewhat reassured the crown prince of Atletico Madrid. After the two sides agreed, Yang Hao returned to Calderón Stadium in the afternoon to sign a contract. Atletico Madrid will also officially announce this appointment to the public. After hanging up the phone, Yang Hao was not as excited as he had imagined. On the contrary, he is quite calm. The real test has just begun, and the burden on his shoulders is heavy. As a time traveler, the current European football scene is full of talents for him. For example, Van Nistelrooy is still recovering from injuries at PSV Eindhoven, while Ronaldinho is still waiting for his flight to Europe at Grêmio. There is also Eto'o, who was loaned from Real Madrid to play for Real Mallorca. It's also interesting to say that before Yang Hao traveled, He happened to see Eto'o, who retired and became the president of the Cameroonian Football Association, suspected of manipulating the game, causing uproar among fans around the world. Who would have thought that in the blink of an eye, Eto'o was just a budding young boy? In the next 20 years, European football will usher in the most prosperous and talented era, as well as the era of superstars belonging to Cristiano Ronaldo and Messi. Yang Hao is very eager and ambitious, wanting to write a brilliant chapter of his own in this best era, so as not to disappoint him in passing through a journey. And coaching Atletico Madrid is his opening, he must write it well no matter what. Time is money. Just after the lunch break, Yang Hao returned to the Calderon Stadium. Unlike last time, his identity has changed now. He is the new head coach of Atletico Madrid. Xiao Hill personally came to the front desk to pick him up and welcomed him into the morning conference room. Unlike the morning when there were only 3 people, Hill and Cerezo, there were several more meeting rooms in the afternoon. Sitting next to Old Hill and Young Hill is club legend Paul Futre, a 34-year-old Portuguese who was Atletico Madrid's first superstar player and retired in Japan in January 1999. Not long ago, he was involved in the transfer rumors between Real Madrid presidential candidate Florentino Perez and Figo. Some say that he helped his agent José Vega meet Florentino. This club legend has been in Madrid recently and has been very active. In Yang Hao's past life, Paul Futre took over as the sports director of Atletico Madrid in November of this year. Now it seems that we need to move forward. Paul Futle's relationship with the Hill father and son was clearly closer, and when he saw Yang Hao, he nodded with a smile as a friendly gesture. Sitting next to Cerezo is the club's board member Clement Balavid, who has been playing for Atletico Madrid for many years, but was cleared out of the team after Hill took over in 1987. After the privatization of the club in 1992, he joined the club's management team as a member of the board of directors until now. After the 96-year-old Hill assault incident, he basically became the representative of the club, whether it was the various meetings and draw ceremonies of the Spanish Football Association or UEFA, which were mostly attended by Balavid. In addition to the management of the club, 2 players were also present on site, namely the team captain Tony Munoz and vice-captain Juan Carlos Aguilera. Tony Munoz, as a left-back, has lost his position this season and has been replaced by the younger Capdevila. At the age of 32, he has also entered the twilight of his career. As a veteran player, 31-year-old Aguilera is actually in his prime and has been more of a right-winger for the team this season. This also reflects the current shortage of talent on the right side of Atletico Madrid. As soon as Yang Hao arrived, the meeting began. Xiao Shi first announced the appointment of Yang Hao, stating that the club has reached an agreement with Antic, who will no longer serve as the head coach of Atletico Madrid, and that Yang Hao will lead the team for the remaining matches of this season. The team has now reached a very critical and extraordinary period, and we need to make some extraordinary decisions with extraordinary people. Xiao Hill used this to explain the reason for the appointment of the senior management. But obviously, this simply cannot convince people. Not only the captain and vice-captain frowned at it, but even Balavid shook his head. This appointment came as a surprise to them, while also leaving them feeling bewildered. Antioch's class is over, it's not a rare thing. The entire Madrid knows that, like the vast majority of Atletico Madrid fans, Old Hill dislikes Antic very much. Although Antique has brought the team a double crown before. Isn't it a joke to hire a 25-year-old Chinese person with no coaching experience after firing Antioch? Is it really a family game to be in charge of a team? But the whole club belongs to the Hill family and Cerezo, and as long as they don't object, it's useless for anyone else to say anything. Of course, after the news spreads, Atletico Madrid fans will definitely protest. And there will be serious protests. It is precisely because of this level of concern that Atletico Madrid's management hopes to handle this change of coach in a low-key manner. Yang Hao sat in his seat, observing the reactions of everyone present, all of which were within his expectations. Opposing is normal, not opposing is strange. In addition to appointing Yang Hao as the head coach, Paul Futter will also serve as the team's sports director. This is also in response to Yang Hao's previous statement that Atletico Madrid has been disorganized and lacks mature thinking in team formation over the past few years. It is purely based on intuition, which is definitely not feasible. So, they chose to appoint a sports director. Paul Futter, as a former superstar player, still has a lot of connections in European football. For example, José Veiga, the Portuguese agent he befriended, is a famous crocodile. Almost all Portuguese players who go abroad to play football have to pass through José Veiga's hands. Even Jorge Mendes, who will make a name for himself in European football in the coming years, is still working as a horse under José Veiga, which shows how well known José Veiga is now. At present, Hugo Lyer within Atletico Madrid is a player of José Veiga. In the coming years, the Portuguese Super League will be a treasure trove of talent. Paul Futter took office hastily, and from receiving a call from Old Hill until now, he has only made a decision for a few hours. It is definitely not feasible to ask him to come up with a complete set of ideas. So, after a few words from the wheels of the car, Futter threw the tricky problem to Yang Hao. This can also be considered as a preliminary exam for Yang Hao. He must fully articulate his upcoming coaching plan in front of everyone at today's meeting. The first and foremost issue is how to avoid relegation. I have calculated that if we want to avoid relegation in La Liga this season, we need to get at least 44.46 points. Yang Hao first briefly introduced some of Atletico Madrid's current situation and the situation of La Liga's relegation. But we only have 32 points now, which means we must score 12 points in the remaining 6 rounds of the league in order to have a chance to avoid relegation. Everyone present actually knows that Atletico Madrid's chances of avoiding relegation this season are very, very slim. Now, Yang Hao's words undoubtedly further confirm this point. In 6 rounds of the league, the total victory is only 18 points. To get 12 points, you need to win at least 4 games. Is it difficult or not? Difficult, and very difficult. Even for a top-tier team, it is very difficult to win 4 out of 6 games. Note that it is now La Liga in 2000. The strength of all teams has not yet widened the gap. In the coming years, with the surging wave of globalization, Real Madrid and Barcelona will take advantage of this trend and their income will climb at an extremely fast pace, attracting more and more football stars. Their overall strength will improve by leaps and bounds, which will completely widen the strength gap with other teams. But now, the era of Western supermarkets has not yet arrived. With the current strength of Real Madrid and Barcelona, it is not easy to win 4 out of 6 matches in La Liga. Not to mention Atletico Madrid, who have already lost 10 rounds. The last victory of the Bed Sheet Legion was in January, and it has been 3 months since then. Will Atletico Madrid continue to stay in the relegation zone with this strength? So, as soon as Yang Hao finished speaking, someone immediately spoke out to refute him. Seeking monthly tickets, collecting, recommending, and following up. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. One line of vitality. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. One line of vitality, isn't that right? Clement Baravid was the first to raise objections. Mr. Yang, it seems that you are not particularly familiar with La Liga. Even in those 2 seasons with 22 teams, it is usually around 40 points to avoid relegation. Did you miscalculate? Everyone present immediately turned to Yang Hao, especially Xiao Hill, looking a bit nervous. If even this is miscalculated, how can it be convincing? Yang Hao smiled and nodded, yes, that's right. Last season, we only needed to get 37 points to avoid relegation. So you still said you want 44.46 points. Clement Balavid himself felt a bit strange. Yang Hao calmly replied, after playing 32 rounds last season, Extremadura, ranked 18th, scored 31 points, while Villarreal, ranked 17th, scored 32 points. So far this season, after 32 rounds of the league, Oviedo, who ranks 18th, has scored 34 points, while Real Betis, who ranks 17th, has 36 points, which is 3.4 points more than before. But please don't forget, they are all 20 teams. Last season there were 4 relegation spots, and this season there are 3 relegation spots. In the mid-1990s, La Liga underwent a reform, which was in the 95-96 and 96-97 seasons, both of which had 22 teams in the league. However, in the 97-98 season, they returned to 20 teams. This has led to changes in the team's promotion and relegation quotas. Before the 98-99 season, La Liga had 4 relegation spots, but this season it has returned to 3 relegation spots. In this way, the overall environment for avoiding relegation is different. Last season, Alves scored 40 points and was able to rank 16th, successfully avoiding relegation. But the situation this season is even more severe, with the 17th place team scoring less than 44 points. It is estimated that it will be difficult to successfully avoid relegation. There aren't really many secrets here, it's just that people don't pay much attention to the difference in points and the comparison with the past. It's more like a vague impression, which leads to Clement Baravid making such a rebuttal. With Yang Hao's explanation, everyone immediately understood. Having played 32 rounds, teams in the same position have significantly increased their points this season by 3 or 4 points compared to last season. Another reason for this is that the top few teams do not have as high points as last season. For example, after 32 rounds of matches last season, the leader Barcelona had 66 points, but this season's leader Deportivo only had 61 points. There is also Real Madrid, who finished 4th in 32 rounds last season, scoring 56 points. They also finished 4th in the same period this season, only scoring 53 points. The team in the top position has fewer points because they have been targeted and lost more points, which means that the middle and lower level teams have received more points, and the competition in the league has become more intense, and the situation has become more chaotic. So, Yang Hao is not wrong. If you want to avoid relegation, you need to get at least 44 points. Xiao Hill scanned around the crowd and found that they were all speechless. He immediately felt delighted, and his gaze at Yang Hao added a bit of confidence. He was always convinced of Yang Hao's analysis and eloquence. But Yang Hao did not pay attention to these, he continued his analysis. The next 6 rounds of the league will face Malaga at home, Valencia away, Barcelona at home, Oviedo away, Sevilla at home, and Real Mallorca away. In these 6 matches, Oviedo and Sevilla are both our direct opponents to avoid relegation. Among them, Sevilla, who was promoted, has been relegated. If we want to avoid relegation, we must bring down Oviedo. We must never make the mistake of the 27th round again in these 2 games. In the 27th round, Atletico Madrid hosted Real Betis at home, which was Antoine's first game under the management of Atletico Madrid. At that time, Atletico Madrid was ranked 17th, Real Betis was ranked 16th, and Antic faced Hiddink in a relegation battle between famous coaches. As a result, Atletico Madrid did not win Real Betis at home. Playing at home and being a direct opponent to avoid relegation, failing to score 3 points is considered a complete defeat for Atletico Madrid. Being relegated is like a war where you die and I live. If you want to live, you have to step on others. The remaining 4 opponents, Malaga is currently in 11th place, Valencia is in 5th place, Barcelona is in 2nd place, and Van Gaal's team is still making a final comeback for the league championship. Barcelona is only 5 points away from the leader Deportivo, so there is still a chance. Finally, there is Real Mallorca, currently ranked 8th. It can be said that the situation that Atletico Madrid will face next is extremely steep, with a towering cliff behind them. This is actually also the reason why Clement Baravid and others oppose changing coaches. Anyway, Antic is also a handsome and experienced person. In such a severe situation, using a 25-year-old rookie instead of him is outrageous, isn't it? Yang Hao has studied the history of Atletico Madrid in his past life. Antic's team suffered a crushing defeat, from 33 to 37 rounds, without winning a single game. He even suffered a devastating home defeat to Barcelona and an away defeat to Valencia, leading to 2 rounds of early relegation. But interestingly, after being relegated, Antioch was dismissed. In the final round of the league after the change of coach, he actually defeated Real Mallorca away, and the head coach at that time was the second-team coach who had just refused to assist Yang Hao, Zambrano. Of course, this can also be understood as a consolation award given to Atletico Madrid by Real Mallorca, who had no desires or demands at the time. But now that he has come and become the head coach of Atletico Madrid, he will never let the tragedy happen again. What I want to say is that every game that comes next is a decisive battle for us, which will determine whether we can continue to stay in La Liga next season. When Yang Hao said this, he looked around at everyone with a serious expression on his face. I know that many people don't believe me in their hearts, which is normal, but what I want to say is, whether you accept it or not, I am now the head coach of Atletico Madrid. This is an unchangeable fact. Let's temporarily abandon all doubts and prejudices, work together, and play well in every game that comes next. I will use the team's next performance to prove my strength and value. After Yang Hao, Old Hill also said a few words, roughly meaning that he supported Yang Hao. At the same time, he also demanded that everyone in the club support Yang Hao. This is a decision made by the management, and everyone must comply. Old Hill has a very high reputation in the club. He has said so the matter is settled. After the meeting, Yang Hao also borrowed a small meeting room from the club. Accompanied by Hill and Paul Futter, he communicated with Tony Munoz and Aguilera, mainly to understand the current situation in the team's changing room. The situation is very bad. Salary arrears are one aspect, and the most important thing is that the team has been in chaos in the past, causing everyone to lose confidence. Many people have already contacted the team in advance. For example, Solari, whose brother Law Redondo is playing for his city rivals Real Madrid, has decided to transfer to Real Madrid at the end of this season. This Argentine winger is still very capable. In Yang Hao's past life, he also held a place in the star-studded Real Madrid team. But he probably didn't expect that now he would go to seek refuge with his brother Law, but as soon as he passed, Redondo was sold to AC Milan by Florentino, and the Argentine waste king fell from grace. Real Madrid signed 3 top La Liga midfielders in one go this summer, namely Makelele, Flavio, and Serrada, with only Makelele playing in the end. Hasselbank is also like this. His agent has been actively working for him and may choose to return to the Premier League, but it is said that PSV Eindhoven is also interested in him. Eindhoven thinks too much. Even if we were to be relegated, they wouldn't be able to afford Hasselbank, said Hill fiercely. As long as the player is still in the contract period and there is no relegation or termination clause in the contract, there is no cheap sale. Nowadays, everyone's focus is no longer on training and playing. They have lost confidence in this season and are all focused on running away quickly. They are unwilling to follow the team to play in La Liga, including many local players. When Tony Munoz said these words, he looked heartbroken. He was the hero of the team's double crown, and at that time, Atletico Madrid was so spirited. Who would have thought that the current bed sheet legion would be relegated? If Yang Hao remembers correctly, in his past life, after Atletico Madrid was relegated, only the 2 captains in front of him and a very small number of players such as Kiko were willing to stay and follow the team to compete in the second division. But after Kiko was seriously injured, his condition was no longer there and he couldn't be retrieved. Tony Munoz is also getting old and his condition is also declining very badly. In the current year of 2000, professional players are over 30 years old and their form is basically difficult to guarantee. After all, the current level of scientific training is still relatively backward. far from being as advanced as 10 or 20 years later. The only thing that can be relied on is Aguilera. Yang Hao has no choice. The only thing he can do now is to hope that the two captains can play a role in the locker room, actively call on the players to regain their fighting spirit, and strive to show their best performance in the last 6 games, as well as in Wednesday's King's Cup. Tony Munoz and Aguilera were both very surprised upon hearing this. The situation of relegation is already so severe. Do you still want to play the King's Cup? You know, the opponent of the Copa del Rey is Barcelona. Barcelona of Van Gaal. The second-ranked team in La Liga now. Are you sure you want to knock on Barcelona at this time? Yang Hao gave a very decisive and unquestionable answer. Yes, we not only have to give it our all, but also win this game. Why? Tony Munoz didn't understand. Yang Hao smiled confidently at his captain, because we need confidence. A simple sentence stunned everyone. Confidence. At such times, for teams like Atletico Madrid, confidence is more precious than gold. Even Antioch is showing off and there is no way to defeat the team. But in the world of football, confidence is not something that can be achieved just by saying it, nor is it something that can be achieved with just a few slogans or a dozen chicken blood. Both players and teams need to gain confidence through games and victories. If we give up the semi-finals of the Copa del Rey in order to avoid relegation, we won't have to play the remaining 6 league matches. When the team was eliminated from the World Cup, relegation was already declared a failure ahead of schedule. So, this game not only needs to be played, but must also be won. The current situation is extremely difficult and harsh, but the more it is, the more I need your help and support. Yang Hao looked at the two captains and said sincerely. Only when we work together can we have the opportunity to carve out a path of blood and create a glimmer of vitality. Seeking monthly tickets, collecting, recommending, and following up. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Top talents that must be excavated for opening files. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7 Top talents that must be excavated for opening files. There is a detail that clearly demonstrates Xiaoxi's support for Yang Hao. When Yang Hao had a meeting with the two captains and made an appointment to go to the training base in Majadahonda, located in the northwest suburbs of Madrid, the newly appointed sports director Paul Futer also ignored him, and Little Hill surprisingly wanted to go with him. Paul Futer is very familiar with Atletico Madrid, has just retired, and the team is still very popular. There is no need for Hill to be in charge at all, and only Yang Hao, a rookie, needs to use Atletico Madrid's prince to come to the platform. Yang Hao was also well aware of this and gave a grateful look to Little Hill. Today you treat me with your heart and soul, and tomorrow I will dedicate myself. Well, no, it's exhausting. Starting from the Calderon Stadium, take the M30 highway to the north, then turn the A6 highway to the west, passing by a high-end Davy Wild community. Is this the Lafenka community? On the A6 highway, sitting in the back row, Yang Hao happened to see that the community was not yet formed. Yes, Florentino's real estate company is also involved, Paul Futley from the passenger seat replied. The Portuguese are quite strange. Why did Yang Hao suddenly mention this? He didn't know that the name Lafenka became well known to countless Chinese fans after 2010. Cristiano Ronaldo, Kaká, Gareth Bale, Benzema, these superstars all live in this community. Zidane, Raúl, Casillas and others originally lived in the city center, but later moved in as well. Well, by the way, there's also Torres. How did Torres perform in our youth team? Yang Hao suddenly asked. If he remembers correctly, Torres had been recovering from a bone fracture for a long time before joining the first team. However, he is not very clear about when the fracture occurred, he only remembers about this year. Have you heard of this kid too? Little Hill asked with a smile as he drove. Yang Hao nodded and said, I have seen him play football, and I believe he can become the best center forward in the future world. The premise is to develop suitable offensive tactics for him to help him leverage his strengths and avoid weaknesses. When he said this, both Little Hill and Paul Futley were somewhat surprised, but they were also very happy. Torres is the best performing player in Atletico Madrid's youth training camp, highly anticipated by countless people. He's doing well now, but he's a bit young, just turned 16, and currently in the U17 youth team. Paul Futley is quite well known. After speaking, the Portuguese added, "Our training ground is very limited, and only the age group above U17 trains here. The rest are distributed to various cooperative youth training clubs. So Gabi and Antonio Lopez should both be here, right?" Yang Hao asked again. Paul Futley was surprised, but soon laughed and said, "It seems like you've really put in a lot of effort." He now began to understand why Little Hill valued Yang Hao so much. Gabi is in U17, Antonio Lopez is in U19, they are all the best players in our youth team. In addition, Manu Del Moral, Diego Rivas and Nuno Rivas, as well as Giri Rosicky, are all good players in the youth team. Yang Hao nodded lightly, showing little interest in the other players. Giri Rosicky is a bit interesting. He shares the same name as his father, but he has a younger brother who currently plays for Sparta Prague in the Czech Republic. His name is Thomas Rosicky. The interesting thing is that from childhood to adulthood, Giri Rosicky has always been more talented and performed better than Thomas Rosicky, which is why Giri Rosicky joined the then glorious Atletico Madrid in 1996. But who would have thought that after a few years, my older brother was still wasting his time in Atletico Madrid's youth training camp, while my younger brother had already gained great fame in China. Many times, choice is more important than ability. After passing through the range of Lafenka, turn south into M40 and enter the area of Majadahonda. Like Lafenka, this place is also a high-end residential area. The training base of Atletico Madrid is surrounded by a residential area of a single family in Daby. A rectangular plot with a width of 2 standard football fields side by side, and a length exactly equal to the length of 3 football fields connected. But there is only one standard stadium equipped with rudimentary stands at the southernmost end, which is the youth team's playing field, and the adjacent open space is the team's training building and parking lot. The facilities are quite rudimentary, which is also a common situation in European football today. Everyone is living a tight life. Where did they have the money to invest in these hardware facilities? After getting off the car, a group of people headed straight to the coach's office in the training building. Antique's 3 visits to the palace were both hurried. The coaching staff of the first team has also received news for a long time. When they see Xiao Xia and Paul Futer accompanying Yang Hao over, it is still uncertain whether the rumors are true. For a moment, the entire office was filled with discussions, feeling that the club's decision was too childish. Is giving up on using a 25-year-old rookie as the head coach. Yang Hao has been paying attention to everyone's reactions since entering the door, which is quite interesting. For example, the old man with white hair in his 50s should be George Perizarro. He will only stay until the end of this season, so it seems irrelevant to Atletico Madrid's hiring of Yang Hao. This Italian goalkeeper coach is not simple. He has worked as an assistant for teams such as Lippi, Bianchi, and Ranieri, and has played for teams such as Napoli, Juventus, Florence, and Valencia. His resume is quite impressive. There are also many world-class goalkeepers trained by him, such as Buffon, Toldo, and Canizares. At least, players who have played FM Football Manager will definitely not be unfamiliar with him. But what really excited Yang Hao's heart was actually the apprentice standing next to Perizarro. Pedro Hero. Experienced FM football managers and players will definitely not be unfamiliar with him, because he can be considered the leader of the coaching industry in the classic FM 2006. Later on, for several generations, he was a top talent in goalkeeper training of 20, and he must be dug at the beginning of the game. 37-year-old Pedro Hero retired last summer and is currently actively preparing for a coaching certificate. It is precisely because Pedro Haro has not yet obtained a coaching certificate that the club decided to keep Perazzaro after firing Ranieri. After all, in formal matches, a certificate is still necessary. Yang Hao secretly remembered Pedro Haro, but he couldn't let him run to his arch-rival Real Madrid again. But on the surface, he remained calm and shook hands with everyone one by one. The biggest difference between current European football and the next few years is that the division of labor is not as detailed. The most typical configuration is the coaching staff. The large coaching staff that used to be often around 10 or even 20 or 30 people now hardly exists. 3 to 5 coaching teams, along with some staff, are basically the configuration of the entire first-team coaching team. Among the staff of the club, there was also a therapist who caught Yang Hao's attention. Because he is very young, only 20 years old, his name is José Carlos García Parales. Upon hearing this name, Yang Hao immediately remembered it and jotted it down. Why? In Yang Hao's past life, this person was poached by Real Madrid in 2012, and his figure can be seen in every celebration photo of Real Madrid's championship since then. The position of a physical therapist is actually very important. It is not only responsible for accompanying the team for treatment during matches, but also serves as a communication bridge between the locker room, coaching staff, and medical team, responsible for developing players' rehabilitation plans. At the first meeting, Yang Hao's assistant was not yet in place, so he didn't participate in many things and let the team continue to follow the original plan. This made everyone even more disappointed in him. Many people thought that being young could persuade the management of Atletico Madrid to do something useful, but the result was nothing. But Yang Hao still made his own demands. Transfer Torres, Gabi, Pablo Garcia, and Antonio Lopez from the youth team to the first team and start training with the first team in the afternoon. I want to examine their performance. After he finished speaking, the staff immediately recorded it. Yang Hao also specifically inquired about Kiko's recovery situation, as the Prince of Atletico Madrid did not perform well after recovering from injury. The answer to his question was young Parales. Kiko's injury is not optimistic, and his recovery is not very ideal. Parales said that he and the team doctors have done their best, but to recover, it will take a longer period of time. As for the current injury situation of the team, there is actually no major problem. Professional players, who hasn't been injured yet. As long as it doesn't affect the competition. They are all young people, but at the age of 20, Parales is more receptive to Yang Hao than others. Yang Hao saw that he was very familiar with the team situation and also had a good understanding of the physical condition of the players. Young people were also easy to handle, so he decided to take him by his side. After leaving the coach's office, Yang Hao didn't even glance at his own office and went straight to the players' resting area. Before them, both captains had already returned to the training base and had told their teammates about what had happened to Calderon, revealing that Yang Hao was coming soon. But the players have had a relatively negative reaction to this. Whether it's Ranieri or Antioch, they are at least famous coaches in European football, but who is Yang Hao? Which stone jumped out of it? Why does he coach Atletico Madrid? With emotions in their hearts, when Yang Hao and his team walked in, the players were indifferent to him. It wasn't until they saw Little Hill and Futer appearing at the same time as Yang Hao that they regained some energy. The general manager and Futer appeared at the same time, and this treatment carries much more weight than the previous Ranieri and Antioch. Of course, when Antioch took office, he was brought over by the head of the custody team, Blanco. Yang Hao was not surprised at all by the attitude of the players. If they show great enthusiasm, then there are ghosts. But what should be said still needs to be said, and the attitude that should be given should still be given. Yang Hao confidently told everyone that he would lead Atletico Madrid to compete in every game. But he estimated that not many people believed it either. He also called on everyone to gather their energy, work together, and help the team overcome difficulties, but the players also showed little interest. This group is all human spirits and won't be easily swayed by a few words. There's no way, Yang Hao can only use his trump card. Typhoon makes landfall, I hope everything is okay. Recommend, collect, and follow up on monthly tickets. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Coach, you're not trying to deceive me, are you? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Coach, you're not trying to deceive me, are you? The problem of salary arrears in La Liga has a long history. Even prestigious teams like Real Madrid and Barcelona have various problems such as unpaid salaries, bonuses, and appearance fees to some extent. Some teams even go so far that, after playing the season, they settle the accounts and make a note. Money no. Yang Hao knows that if it weren't for Florentino's sale of Real Madrid Sports City to the government and a large amount of start-up funds, it would still be uncertain whether there would be a galactic battleship in the future. This belongs to the heritage of Bernal. Unfortunately, Atletico Madrid's training ground is located in the remote Majadahonda. The debt of over €70 million, coupled with the team's unpaid salaries, has made Atletico Madrid's financial situation unbearable. When Yang Hao mentioned this, the anger of the players completely erupted. The football stars who were originally reluctant to deal with the rookie head coach are now all full of complaints. This claim is that the team has delayed their salary for several months, while others claim that they have both seniors and juniors. Some even ask Yang Hao to give a clear answer. When will the club be able to pay off the outstanding salary? The most awkward thing here is undoubtedly Xiao Hill, as he is the general manager. The whole club belongs to their family, and the players are asking for salary in person. If old Hill were here, the players probably wouldn't dare to be so bold, but little Hill is a good person. Paul Futter, standing beside him, couldn't help but sigh as he saw Hill being entangled by the players and then looked at Yang Hao, who was always smiling. This person, once they like someone, no matter what they do, they feel it makes sense. He couldn't even figure it out. How could Xiao Xia think that Yang Hao could save Atletico Madrid? He sold it and willingly helped him count the money. Alright, how do you clean up now that you've got yourself into this field? If Atletico Madrid had money, would the management team have even faced the fire of fans and sold Jose Mali, who was deeply loved by fans, before? It's okay not to mention selling people, but when it comes to players, the resentment becomes even heavier. It was originally agreed that selling someone would make money, but in the end, if someone sells, where did the money go? Yang Hao is also a bachelor, directly helping the players curse those bastards in the custody team, saying that they are untrustworthy and should not deceive the players' hard-earned money. This even made him talk to the players about a few common topics. Paul Futley looked dumbfounded from the side. With just this eloquence, no wonder little Hill is confiding in him. However, Yang Hao also stopped at an appropriate time, and when the time was approaching, the conversation changed accordingly. In the past, the trusteeship team did these things that were not human resources, but now they have let go. Mr. Hill has just taken over the team and is still sorting out the accounts and tracing the whereabouts of the funds. However, this will take some time, and everyone needs to understand. Yang Hao's words slightly calmed down the players' resentment towards Xiao Hill. But everyone's business is the club's business, and we all see their difficulties, so the club will not stand idly by. Mr. Hill has already agreed to let go of past debts for now. The team guarantees that once the accounts are sorted out, they will not owe everyone a penny. We hope everyone will remain patient. But before that, our game had to continue, and everyone knew how dangerous our current situation was. If we were to be relegated, the club's income would be further affected, and it would only be even more difficult to pay salaries. When Yang Hao said this, he deliberately stopped and looked at the players in front of him, realizing that they had all calmed down and were all listening to him. It is obvious that when it comes to money, they are all very concerned. Of course, if everyone wants to go out and fight for the club, they naturally cannot go hungry. Therefore, Mr. Hill has decided that from now on, even if he sells iron, he will never owe anyone a penny. All salaries, appearance fees, and bonuses will be paid out immediately after the game is over, and he will never break his promise. The players were all in an uproar. Is this true or false? No more arrears. Everyone couldn't believe it and immediately looked at Little Hill. Just now, he was entangled by the players and couldn't help but feel the concern of the players. Especially with Yang Hao's words just now, he felt confident in his heart. The head coach is right. Once we have sorted out the past debts, we will definitely send them to everyone. But from now on, we will take the game as the node, and immediately pay salaries, appearance fees, and bonuses after each game. I assure everyone that I will never break my promise this time. Yang Hao is a new official who has taken office, and his guarantee doesn't carry much weight, but Xiao Hill's guarantee is different. The players still believe what he says to some extent. More importantly, there are only 3 days left until the next game. Their contracts are all in the hands of Atletico Madrid, and the season is not yet over, so a transfer is even more impossible. It's okay to wait for an additional 3 days. 3 days later, before the home game against Barcelona, make sure to pay this part of the money first. Leaving the player rest area, Yang Hao, Xiao Hill, and Paul Futer walked side by side. Yang Hao said it very simply. Just now, in front of the players, it's not acceptable for Xiao Xia not to agree, but the reality is, where is the change? Bank loan, mortgage the player's contract to the bank, and try to get a portion out first, Yang Hao suggested. Spanish banks don't have this kind of business, probably not even in the UK. When it comes to the financial industry, it has to be that the UK has a more lavish time playing. If it really doesn't work, we'll sell the players and sign the contract first, asking the other party to make a prepayment. After a pause, Yang Hao looked at Xiao Hill with great certainty and said, Michel, believe me, as long as you get through this difficult time, I promise to give you a strong Atletico Madrid team. When Yang Hao said this, he was really very confident. So much so that Paul Futley beside him felt puzzled. Who gave him the courage to make such a promise? You've been overthinking it. Nowadays, transfers between clubs often end up in arrears, said Paul Futer. What? Many teams outside are even poorer than us. Yang Hao said he was very speechless. Do you also have such a rough time in European football? Think about it, why do Bundesliga teams always like to sell players to Bayern Munich? La Liga teams always like to sell players to Real Madrid and Barcelona, asked Paul Futer. Before Yang Hao could answer, he gave the answer himself. Because once a debt dispute arises, it is easier to handle it between countries. So Jose Mali and Shamat. Xiao Hill shook his head and said, actually, we have received the first installment of funds, not much money, and we can't even share it with the players. But Yang Hao had already discussed this matter with him several times before, and he had also made a promise. So, after pausing for a moment, Xiao Hill looked at Yang Hao again and said, don't worry, I promise you that I will not break my promise. I will come up with a solution to the money issue. Before the match against Barcelona, I will definitely resolve it. Yang Hao nodded and nodded, still believing to some extent what Little Hill said in his heart. Atletico Madrid may not really have money, but the Hill family also doesn't have money. Don't be joking, say that out loud. Who believes it? Throughout history, at home and abroad, which boss doesn't claim to be extremely poor? Is there a shortage of examples where the company goes bankrupt and the boss earns a lot of money? The key depends on whether the boss is willing to pay out of his own pocket. Little Hill and Paul Futley have both left. The club has just experienced turbulence, and they still have a lot to do. Yang Hao stayed at the Mahata Honda training base and asked Paralesh to go to the player rest area to call Belilan over. He himself visited his office. The layout is quite simple, including a desk, sofa, TV, and so on. Unfortunately, there is not a computer on the desk. Computers, as high-tech gadgets, are too advanced for elderly people like Rainieri and Antique. We need to have the club match it another day, and occasionally we can play StarCraft, Warcraft, or a football manager. Oh, by the way, now should be the era of CM champion football managers. Sitting on the office chair, Yang Hao suddenly remembered Antique. I don't know if he was also sitting here when he received the after-school call at noon. In any case, we must not repeat the mistakes of Ranieri and Antioch. If you want to sit in this position, you need to stabilize the changing room. The overall mood of the players has barely stabilized now. As long as Hill can fulfill his promise in advance before the match against Barcelona, I believe the problem will not be significant, but this is the overall situation. Specifically for each player, this requires targeted handling. As Guardiola said in his future book, My Football, and the People of My Life. A head coach only has 30% of his energy focused on football, and the remaining 70% is spent outside of football. This is not about the head coach paddling, but managing a team requires so much energy. The simplest thing is that each team's players come from all over the world, with their own beliefs and values. How can we blend them into a whole, so that they can win games on the field for a common goal? Just shout a few slogans to them, okay? Those who have managed a company must know that it is only feasible for a few people, but it is not feasible for a large number of people. This requires management and communication. Yang Hao has always believed that preaching big principles is useless, and that it is necessary to be more direct and practical. A person will not do things that betray their own interests. When Yang Hao thought of this, Paralesh and Belilan happened to appear at the door of his office. Please come in, Juan. Yang Hao immediately stood up from his office chair with a smile and welcomed him. An interesting thing is that both of them are 25 years old, and one is the head coach and the other is a player. After Yang Hao warmly greeted Belilan to sit down, Paralesh withdrew and also closed the door. This kid is quite knowledgeable and witty. The conversation between the head coach and the players is not something that others would normally want to hear. When I decided to coach Atletico Madrid, everyone told me that Juan Beltran was a trustworthy player, and his strength was greatly underestimated. As soon as Yang Hao met, he sent his own appreciation, which surprised and even guarded the shy and introverted Belilan. The head coach doesn't seem like a good person to praise people like this when they first meet. You're not trying to deceive me, are you? Seeking collection, seeking recommendation, seeking monthly pass, seeking follow-up reading. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Core Mutiny Assassin. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Chapter 9. Core Mutiny Assassin. Yang Hao believes that his strength lies in his ability to observe the subtle movements and expressions of others. For example, Belilan's current expression is like a curled-up hedgehog, which makes him decide to change his conversation strategy. He began to slowly guide Belilan and talk about what had happened during his 2 years at Atletico Madrid. I hope to get to know you better and our team better. So, Yang Hao slowly started chatting with Belilan. From the problems that Belilan encountered when he first joined Atletico Madrid, to Ranieri's use of him, to the difference between Antoine's 2 coaching sessions at Atletico Madrid, and his disagreement with Antoine's judgment. Belilan is an honest person, very honest. In fact, our biggest problem this season, I think, is that there are more young players and the defense problem is very serious. However, Antic doesn't seem to think so. He thinks that the defense problem is because our attack started with problems. Attack and defense have always been a dynamic balance. It cannot be said whether Antic's viewpoint is wrong. For example, as long as your attacking power is strong enough to prevent the opponent from attacking, then the issue of defense is not a problem. Yang Hao did not comment on this. Belilan has recently heard a lot of boos from Atletico Madrid fans because they feel that the team's midfield is too prone to problems, and the first and foremost issue is that Belilan always does not actively participate in defense. That's not something I'm good at. It's like Saki keeps asking me to strengthen my physical confrontation and become more powerful. At the same time, he wants me to think about defense first when playing football, and then think about how to attack, but I haven't met his requirements. Yang Hao nodded, these are all imaginable. Italian coaches, including those like Sacchi and Ranieri, often prioritize defense. This cannot be said wrong, but players also have their own ideas that need to be adapted to. Some players just can't adapt to it. Do you know why I was the first to talk to you? Yang Hao looked directly at Belong and asked. This fishing star from the Canary Islands couldn't understand his head coach, feeling that his eyes were sharp, his words were direct, and he didn't beat around the bush, which made him feel a bit overwhelmed. I believe that if our team wants to reverse this unfavorable situation and successfully avoid relegation in the future, you will be our most important and crucial core. Belilon looked at the head coach of his own age in surprise, his eyes full of doubt. But soon, Yang Hao dispelled his doubts. Yang Hao got up and went to his desk, took white paper and a pen, and started drawing directly in front of Belilon. He formed a 4,231 formation, with a focus on circling the 10th position in the middle of the third formation. You should be familiar with this tactic, right? Over the years, Deportivo has been using this style of play, and I hope you can take on this position. Of course, Belilon is not unfamiliar with this tactical approach. Deportivo is the leader of La Liga this season, and Irueta's tactics have been studied by many people. Like de Jaminga. Jaminga, now the number 10 midfielder of Deportivo. No, I don't think his connection with the two flanks is close enough. I hope you can become the core of the team's forward attack, delivering bullets to the front center forward, and becoming a stable receiving point for the ball in the center and back. At the same time, it is necessary to be able to connect two flanks, and if necessary, form a joint attack with the winger in the ribs. While speaking, Yang Hao also drew the rib area on the blueprint. Belilon is a bit introverted and shy, but he is a very smart player and suddenly thinks of Barcelona's number 4 position. What is the biggest weakness of having only one lower back? Isn't it just rib defense? Why is there a double back waist in football? The reason is simple, because there are super number 10 players like Maradona. When one midfielder cannot block the opponent's number 10 player, then two are needed. Moreover, the double lower back can better protect the rib area. But now, many teams are still sticking to a single midfielder, such as Barcelona. I believe these are all things you are best at and can do very well. Yang Hao smiled confidently. Belilon was somewhat moved. In the past 2 years at Atletico Madrid, the team has mostly adopted a 442 formation, and he has always been required to participate in defense or be directly pulled to the sidelines, which are not his strengths. Playing 442 requires both players in the midfield to have defensive abilities, unless they are playing in a diamond midfield. But now, there are hardly any teams playing diamond midfield. What about defense? Belilon asked with concern. We will adopt a holistic defense, with 2 defensive midfielders behind you to protect you. All you need to do is to do your part under the team's overall defensive strategy. I can guarantee that the majority of your energy will be spent on attacking, passing, organizing, and scheduling. When Belilon heard this, he raised his head and looked at the head coach in front of him incredulously. He is very clear that this is simply a set of tactics tailored for him, which can maximize his advantages, avoid his weaknesses, and fully unleash his strength. If he had doubts about Yang Hao's enthusiasm and praise just now, then now he is really starting to believe, and even has already believed. No head coach would tailor tactics for players they don't value, especially someone like Yang Hao who almost bet the entire team's attack on him. Clever as Berlin, he could already guess that Yang Hao would choose Hasselbank in the front line. Kiko holds a high position in the locker room and the hearts of fans, but he has never been an efficient scorer. Since his serious injury last season, he has not scored a single goal and his performance has been lackluster since his comeback. Even so, daring to take down Kiko requires great courage. It may even trigger a mutiny in the changing room. After reaching a preliminary consensus, Yang Hao further shared his tactical ideas with Belilon. Many people say that Bellingham is Zinedine Zidane from Spain, and that's only half the point. The two are very similar in terms of height, technical characteristics, and passing ability. But the biggest reason why Bellingham is Spanish Zidane and not French Bellingham is due to physical confrontation. Zinedine Zidane's physical resistance is far superior to that of Bellingham. This excellent physique allows Zidane to hold the ball steadily even under intense defensive pressure. But Bellingham cannot achieve this. Even Saki's request for Bellingham to strengthen his physical confrontation and strength was difficult for him to achieve. This is the gap. In this situation, Yang Hao's tactics must also accommodate Bellingham and Hasselbank, who are at the forefront. If Atletico Madrid wants to rely on the current lineup to create a 42-31 tactic, it is impossible to copy the tactics of Deportivo or Valencia, especially not to use high-level defense. Once pressed, both Hasselbank and Bellingham are easily caught up in close combat with defensive players, which is not what the two players are best at or should do. Therefore, Yang Hao needs to set the team's pressure zone in the opponent's 30-meter area to the midline, leaving enough impact space for Hasselbank. Not only that, he also needs to develop the team's defensive pressure tactics based on the defensive weaknesses of Hasselbank and Bellingham. Simply put, try to push the opponent's ball towards the sidelines as much as possible. In this way, the defensive pressure on Hasselbank and Bellingham will be much less. But Solari and Aguilera on both sides will bear more pressure and pressure. This is actually something that cannot be done. To some extent, Bellingham, the classic number 10 midfielder, does not meet Yang Hao's requirements, and Hasselbank also does not meet Yang Hao's requirements for a centre forward. But now, he only has these two players on hand, and can only create tactics based on their characteristics. After chatting with Bellingham for over half an hour, the Spaniard's expression on his face became noticeably more relaxed when he left, and his attitude towards Yang Hao was completely different from when he entered the door. Even Yang Hao felt that Bellingham was looking forward to his performance in this tactical approach. Bellingham's agent is also quietly contacting the team for him, and Yang Hao is not sure if he has colluded with Deportivo. However, Bellingham must have some thoughts of leaving the team. Atletico Madrid's performance this season has left everyone lacking confidence in this team. Since we are leaving, of course, we hope to gain more bargaining chips when joining a new team. Moreover, Bellingham is a person with high professional ethics and has particularly high expectations of himself. Previously, he couldn't see the opportunity, so that's okay. Now, Yang Hao has given him a chance to repay Atletico Madrid while also proving himself. He hasn't gone to great lengths to seize it yet. In this regard, Yang Hao may have more confidence in Bellingham than Bellingham himself. Yang Hao was very satisfied with his conversation with Bellingham. After seeing off the Spaniard, he asked Paralesh to call Dutch forward Hasselbank over. Unlike Bellingham, Hasselbank's personality is not as easy to talk about. Even this guy belongs to the type of prickly personality. When dealing with such players, one often cannot confront them. Even coaches like Ranieri and Antic may not be able to make Hasselbank obedient. How can Yang Hao be confident that his demands can be obeyed by Hasselbank? It is estimated that the Dutch are more likely to go berserk on the spot. So, when dealing with players like Hasselbank, it is often necessary to follow their instructions, grasp their psychology, understand what they want most, and then guide them appropriately. Before Antic put out the fire, Hasselbank scored a flood of goals in the league, surpassing players such as Roy Mackay, Milosevic, and Catania on the La Liga top scorer list, on par with Athletic Santander's Salva Barresta. But after Antoine took office, Hasselbank's goal-scoring efficiency has significantly declined in recent times. In the past 6 rounds of the league, he only scored 2 goals. On the contrary, Roy Mackay, who has scored 6 goals in the last 3 rounds of the league, especially against Atletico Madrid, has scored a hat-trick, which has made the Dutch centre stand out for a while. As Dutch, Hasselbank also felt the pressure from Roy Mackay. Yang Hao believes that in order to deal with Hasselbank, the key figure is not anyone else, but the Black Swan Ridge card. Seeking monthly tickets, collecting, recommending, and following up. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Our head coach is not simple. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Our head coach is not simple. Atletico Madrid players are waiting in the rest area for their afternoon training session. When they saw Belilon coming out of the head coach's office and returning to the rest area, the clever therapist Paralesh ran over and quietly called Hasselbank away, and everyone immediately started discussing. It is very necessary for the new coach to communicate with the players when he takes office. Everyone also anticipated it, but didn't expect the order to be like this. Belilon surprisingly ranks first, and Hasselbank, the team's top scorer, surprisingly ranks second. Everyone immediately laughed to themselves, and many people were waiting to see the good play. Who is Hasselbank? This kid is just a prick, and he's competitive and doesn't like anyone. The two captains probably talked about it, and if the first one calls Kiko, then Hasselbank probably agrees. There's no other way. Kiko is indeed a great contributor to the team, and in terms of resume, the Dutch should recognize him. Unexpectedly, it was Belilon. In the past 2 seasons at Atletico Madrid, this guy who came out of a fishing village in the Canary Islands did not play well, and many people even criticized his playing style. Because his defense is really not good. Especially in the defense line, there is a lot of opinion towards Belilon. Fans have also noticed this, so they are now booing Belilon. Wait, I'm afraid we'll start arguing. In the rest area, I don't know who said such a sentence, which made many people laugh. With Hasselbank's personality, it's really possible to do this. Everyone else's reactions are also different. Both captains were somewhat worried, and there were also some who gloated and waited to see the good show. Bellerin turned his head and glanced at Kiko, only to find that his face was expressionless and he couldn't tell what he was thinking. Since his serious injury, he has become somewhat strange. Actually, it can also be understood. A person used to be so powerful, pursued by so many people, suddenly fell from the cloud, who could bear it? Belilon is very smart, he even guesses that this new head coach is not foolish. He probably knows that Kiko is difficult to deal with, so he first calms down the others and stabilizes the situation. Even if Kiko wants to make a fuss, he can't make it out. Professional football is so cruel. An injury completely changed a person's fate. Just as Belilon was lost in thought, Ruben Baraja suddenly leaned over and gently patted Belilon's arm in a daze. "Hey, how is our head coach?" Baraja asked with concern. He knows the rules of the changing room and doesn't inquire about the conversation. He cares more about the head coach. Belilon's personality makes it difficult for him to make close friends, and Baraja can say a few more words. He is different from Sachai, Ranieri, and Antioch. Nonsense, so young and much more handsome than those old men. Baraja first made a joke and then asked, "What's different specifically?" Belilon hesitated for a moment, pretended to lean in the direction of Baraja unintentionally, and whispered, "He wants to kick both his lower back." Baraja opened his mouth in surprise and almost shouted out loud. "Schwang!" Baraja was surprised and spoke incoherently. He quickly covered his mouth with both hands, afraid that he might accidentally shout out and be overheard, which would ruin the head coach's good deed. Belilon nodded heavily. He knows why Baraja is so nervous and excited. Ruben Baraja comes from Valladolid and is a youth training player for him. He joined Atletico Madrid on a free transfer in 1996, hoping to make a career in this double crown winning capital team. He doesn't have that dazzling talent or outstanding skills, he is more diligent and practical. Just like in the past few years, from Saki to Ranieri to Antioch, the biggest evaluation of Baraja is that he can run, has a sense of attacking from behind, and has a long-range shot. Of course, his passing is very good, and his defense is also very good, which can be considered as both offensive and defensive. But what about this? When the team plays in midfield, what the defensive player in midfield needs most is to be a wall. Whether in terms of height, strength confrontation, or technical characteristics, Bibu is clearly more suitable than Balaha. That's also why Bibu can become a key player in the team, while Balaha cannot. But if the team really changes formations and adopts a double back, then the opportunity for Balaha will come. In terms of a double waist configuration, it is impossible for two players with excellent defensive abilities, but most likely they are two complementary players. Bieber's passing and organizing abilities are not strong, but his defense is excellent, while Balaha has a back kick and good passing ability, which forms a certain complementarity. Are you sure? Balaha couldn't believe it. He is already 25 years old and has been eagerly waiting for opportunities. Except for Bibu, who is injured or absent, it is difficult for him to start. Even if he occasionally starts or comes on as a substitute, the team's tactics make it difficult for him to show his characteristics, which makes him energetic and useless. This is the last chance, Belilan said solemnly. A chance to avoid relegation. If the new coach's tactical reform is not successful again, then Atletico Madrid will really be finished. This is not only a shame for Atletico Madrid, but also a stain on their professional careers. In the future, everyone mentioning Atletico Madrid this season will mention all the players present. If the new head coach is really willing to give me a chance, I will work hard for him. Balaha said loudly. Belilan is very aware of the strength of this teammate, but saying such things at this time is a bit too much of a second choice. In La Liga, as the head coach of Atletico Madrid, if given a chance, there are many people willing to work hard for him. I heard that he drew the Uruguayan young player from the second team, Belilan reminded. Are you talking about Pablo Garcia? Balaha also paid close attention to this player. Belilan nodded. This player has not played in the first team since joining the team, but has trained with the team and his strength is really good. He is very similar in height and strength to Babel, but the South American player's footwork is even better. We already have Fresnedoso and Hugo Liar, don't we? Balaha frowned slightly. With one more person, the competition becomes even more intense. Who knows? Belilan shook his head. He felt that the new head coach had many ideas, some of which were similar to Sachai. For example, Yang Hao mentioned to him that the focus of defense is on the distance from the opponent's 30-meter area to the center line, which means that as long as the opponent's ball passes 30 meters, Atletico Madrid starts to press and pressure. But they are all coercion and oppression, and there are also different types. Sometimes it is localized compression, which is functional, such as to buy time for the defensive line to settle, delay the opponent's attack, or to force the opponent to pass the ball to the sidelines, and so on. Sometimes it's full court pressure, so it only has one purpose, to grab the ball. Sometimes it's pseudo-oppression, which means pretending to be oppressed in order to force the other person to pass back and give oneself more breathing time. Players need to adapt to different situations on the field. Atletico Madrid players are not unfamiliar with this. Because that's what Saki asked for. But Yang Hao also has differences. For example, he doesn't want the opponent to launch an attack from the center, so pressure is to force the opponent to transfer the ball to the sidelines. At this point, the wingers need to actively push forward, even more advanced than the center forward. This is very special. Bellong did not tell Balaha, and Yang Hao also revealed more tactical details to him. One of them is that Yang Hao hopes to have Bellong take on the core role. Just now, Yang Hao said a sentence that made Bellong feel excited and shocked even to this day. I have looked at the team's games and performance over the past 2 seasons. In the previous season, our players were not adapted to Saki's requirements, especially the establishment of a no-ball running system, which was the reason for our overall poor performance. Saki's coaching was like a deviation from the track, and Antioch and Ranieri corrected it again. However, at this point, many of our players were actually in chaos, switching back and forth between several different tactical concepts, and many people simply couldn't adapt. So now, our ball-free running system is a mess. Instead of letting everyone run aimlessly on the field, it's better to have them run tightly around a core. And this core is you. At that time, Yang Hao pointed firmly, unquestionably, and unwaveringly at Belilon. This is the first time in his life that a Spanish midfielder has been given such high expectations. Is there anything more touching than tailoring tactics for him and building a team with him as the core? After Belilon returned to the rest area, the more he thought about it, the more he felt the flame in his heart that had already been extinguished start to burn again. And the more it burns, the stronger it becomes. As time passed, everyone began to wonder. Because the head coach's office was quiet and quiet, it was as calm as words. The argument they had hoped for was tumultuous, but it did not appear. Is it that guy Hasselbank took too fast and too hard, and suddenly knocked down the head coach? Do you want to rush over and save our head coach? Just as everyone was lost in thought, the office door suddenly opened. Then I saw Hasselbank walking out of the room with a smile on his face. When he left, he didn't forget to turn around and bid farewell to the head coach with a smile, while also closing the door. The Dutch people laughed all the way, grinning and revealing their dazzling white teeth, almost humming a song on the spot. What is the situation? Has Hasselbank been beaten to foolishness? When I walked in just now, I was still angry. Why is it so beautiful now? The Dutch man walked in with a smile and saw the surprised expressions on everyone's faces, and immediately burst into laughter. Our new head coach is so nice, I like him. Everyone almost fell head on. What's going on? Brainwashed. Hasselbank's transformation is too great, isn't it? But it's impossible. Isn't he already in close contact and leaving the team after the end of this season? At this point, what chips does the head coach have that can captivate him? Everyone looked at the head coach's office again and couldn't help but feel a mysterious aura in their hearts. Our head coach is not easy. Seeking monthly tickets, collecting, recommending, and following up. End of this chapter.